He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
Okay, everyone, this is the Alex Marlow Show, and it's going to be an odd one today, but we are prepared for you due to the Amazon Web Services major outage that's disrupted major websites across the world, some of the biggest websites on earth. We're going to have a funky show because I cannot get into my usual, let's say, gear, for lack of a better expression, and so Missy's going to be cobbling this together. But luckily, I've got a great interview in the can with you with Aaron Prager, one of Dennis's sons, who's on this incredible road to recovery after struggling with drugs and alcohol and is now using his sobriety for good and his platform of PragerU for good. He's a super cool guy. You're going to hear his story and about his new podcast and something I think is going to be very relatable to just about everyone in the audience. And I've been wanting to share this interview with you for a while. We got it in the bank. But I will tell you, there's a lot of news that I wish we could talk about today. Some of it we'll talk about tomorrow. But I will note that these websites, Amazon, Disney+, Lyft, the McDonald's app, New York Times, Reddit, Ring, your doorbell app, Robinhood, Snapchat, all of these and so many more dependent on Amazon Web Services. And this is just an unbelievable reminder that we are really dependent on a small amount of major cloud service providers, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. It's pretty much it. And so when a major outage occurs, there could be really big consequences, and this may leave us pretty vulnerable. So unbelievable stuff that we got to deal with this, but we got to deal with it. And the show must go on, but man, there was so much in the news right now that I wish I could share with you. It was no Kings weekend, but I got to tell you, there was one King, Shohei Ohtani. People are blowing through this way too fast. Guys, he hit 3 home runs in the same game on the day he won the pennant on the mound, by striking out 10 in 6 scoreless innings. It could be the greatest performance in sports history, period. Could literally be in the history of sports. Could be the greatest game ever played, certainly in baseball. And it's America's pastime. So, it's important to reflect on it. I got to watch it with my children on Friday night, one of the greatest games ever. So there is one King. It is Shohei Ohtani. Dodgers headed to the Super Bowl, the World Series, which is awesome for me as a baseball fan in the LA area with small kids who play ball. But the No Kings protest, I really want to give you my full analysis of that. Overall, I think it was pretty lame and ineffective from the Democrats and their violent streak coming out. Robert De Niro calling Stephen Miller a Nazi. There's this viral teacher, which is the lead story right now at Breitbart News, who was mimicking Charlie Kirk's assassination, getting shot in the neck. There's others calling for violence outright, but all the stupidity, the inflatable dinosaur outfits, the inflatable unicorn outfits that people were wearing, it's so weak. It's so weak and lame. And they had some numbers, but a lot of this is funded by AstroTurf groups, and it's just not very persuasive, I think, in general. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. And so we'll have more of that for you at Breitbart.com, as always, and later in the week when hopefully we get back to normal internet. I got video of Jimmy Kimmel grooming. He's got a drag show that's going on where he's grooming kids now. So that's his response to all the outrage, is now he's going to go full groomer on us. I want to get into the Louvre heist with you, but we'll have that for you at Breitbart News. I can't believe it. Some of Napoleon's jewels getting stolen from the Louvre. Pretty wild. And as always, Middle East peace drama, which is significant. We knew the peace process wasn't just going to be automatic, wasn't going to be super easy. And both sides now, Hamas and Israel, are both claiming the other side is violating ceasefires. So again, I recommend more info on that at Breitbart.com, and we'll have more later in the week when we get back to normal. I will say, before we go any further, that we have a great sponsor for the show, LifeWise. And this is with a heavy heart to bring this up, because 3 weeks ago, Charlie Kirk was supposed to be the one reading this to you. But just 2 days before he was assassinated, he decided to support this explosive new documentary. And his death and the violent attacks on churches and schools remind us that we are in a real spiritual battle. But there's hope. Church attendance is rising, especially among young people. And for that hope to last, we need generational change. That's why Charlie wanted you to see Off School Property in theaters October 23rd. The film tells the story of LifeWise, a nonprofit bringing Bible classes to public school students during the school day. Charlie was excited about this mission. Check out this clip.
So this nonprofit called LifeWise in Ohio said, okay, we'll raise the money, find the space, and the school has to allow 1 hour of religious instruction. So I just learned about this a couple days ago. This could be a revolution in government schools across the country.
Now it's up to us to carry it forward. Take your family and friends to see Off School Property in theaters nationwide October 23rd. Find a theater near you at lifewise.org/Alex Marlow. That's lifewise.org/Alex Marlow. And here's my interview with Aaron Prager.
All right, I have a super interesting guest on the show today, Aaron Prager, one of Dennis Prager's sons. And he's just launched a new show on PragerU called American Recovery. And it really starts off with his background as someone who is a recovering addict and is sober and is using this platform to, I think, reach a lot of people who could use content exactly like this. Aaron, I've been watching a lot of your stuff over the last couple of days, and it's very brave of you to be out there. I know you're brave, and that's something that certainly I'm sure your dad's proud of. But I want to hear about your background, just a brief synopsis of where you're coming from, what you're all about, so that the audience can be filled in.
All right. So first off, I'm Aaron Prager. I just launched a show over on PragerU.com called American Recovery. And I mean, my background, it's interesting whenever people ask me this kind of question is, because right at the top of the list is who my father is. It's Dennis Prager.
Yeah.
And, as you would imagine, I was afforded certain things growing up in life. And but that didn't stop the downward trajectory that eventually did find me, that, as you had said, I'm now on the back end of and trying to reach out to other people to help them, if not being in the same shoes, similar. And I think we live in an age right now where a lot of people, whether it's not just addiction to substances or alcohol, a lot of people are walking around spiritually bankrupt, for lack of a better phrase, and looking for a way to move forward. So tell me about how you fell into this life of addiction, of drugs and alcohol, because I think that this is something powerful about the fact that you did not come from, you weren't on the streets, you didn't have a hopeless childhood, but you still ended up in a bad spot. And I think that's actually very relatable. I feel like we hear from a lot of people who came and who were sort of born into troubles, and you weren't, but they found you very quickly. Yeah, I did, however, spend some time. One thing I want to just set the record straight here. I did spend some time in my later stages of addiction where I should say it like this. I purposefully spent time on the street. It's not by any means I could have, if I had just changed a few things in my life, I could have had a roof over my head. If I just accepted some boundaries that maybe I can't go here, not even 100%, then I would have been able to have 3 square meals and a roof over my head. But how did I really get there? Slowly but surely. There wasn't like this catalyst that was like, one day I'm fine living life on life's terms, and then ended up, on the road to homelessness, if you will. It was slowly but surely. And what I like to tell people is that I remember being the kid who would go to parties a lot, but I would always be the kid who would party longer and harder than everybody around me. I would always be the one when people are starting to fall asleep. I was the one who was staying awake. When people are like, oh, we've, run out of the substance we're using right now, let's call it a night. I'm like, nope, we got to keep going, and I just thought that, and I would use to my parents, to my mother and my father, I would say to all of them, and to my brother for that matter, I'm just a kid being a kid. And it was a party. But the moment, I can't tell you when it turned into addiction, but I remember the time when it stopped being a party and I woke up and my hand was shaking. And I realized that I might have a bigger problem on my hands here. That lasted all of about 5 seconds in my head, because I was immediately then overtaken with, how do I get back up to where I was feeling a half hour ago? So what was it like being in the house? I know you're a product of divorce, and that's a traumatizing thing that I think a lot of people in our age group went through. But you're in the house with your dad, and was he aware of how much you were struggling? Because I'm sure I was listening to his shows at the time, and he was professional enough not to let it on, but it sounds very upsetting. Well, my father is amazing at being able to compartmentalize things. I don't think he'd have a problem with me saying that. I can give my family credit to the point where when things got so blatant, they were able to see it. But I also have to take some credit in me being just very devious and very manipulative myself and good at hiding things, because that's one thing that I think all people are amazing at who struggle with substances, who live in the ism of alcoholism and drug addiction, is that we are masters of disguise. We are chameleons. We are very good at putting on fronts to people to make the outside look nice and neat, while we are metaphorically and sometimes literally rotting underneath. And that's what I was. I was not just physically, but I was mentally, emotionally, and more important than anything, spiritually rotten on the inside. where I was more concerned with how do I get my next fixed? Who can I screw over? If something is not, as you would say, going to directly benefit me above anybody else, I'm not interested in doing that. But in the interim, if my dad's asking, Aaron, why'd you sleep into 4 o'clock in the morning? Why do you, smell a certain way or whatever? I'd come up with any and every excuse I could find. And if he didn't buy it at first, I would keep hammering it. So you can't I can't put blame on my father or my mother when she was still alive for not being able to just identify the problem and then magically have a solution to it.
So you had a brother who's a high achiever and your dad is a high achiever, and you were adopted. What age were you adopted?
At birth.
At birth. So I'll tell you, it's interesting as a longtime listener of your dad. I know that he was very vocal on the show about he never regarded blood as mattering at all. But you said in some of your content that I've been watching that you felt inadequate when you were very young. Could you describe that a little bit for us?
Well, inadequacy is the perfect word. I had, and I'll be very candid with you, to some degree I have now, this sense of inadequacy. Am I going to measure up to my father? Am I going to measure up to my brother? But the difference between then and now is now it's manageable, and I'm able to channel it into something productive, like I believe all young men should be. We should, have aspirations, and that's a positive trait to have. Whereas if you're solely living in inadequacy and I'm never going to measure up, it's very similar to someone telling you just because of X, Y, and Z immutable characteristic, you're never going to achieve anything.
Yeah. So what was it about there that made you feel? Were they just? Your dad's obviously a high achiever, but he's also very inclusive. What was he like as a parent? Was he able to? Did you feel like you got enough positive feedback, or was it something else?
So, number one at the top of the list, I want to share this with your viewers as well, is that my father, to his eternal credit, as far as back as I can remember, whenever, he would have his office at the house, and I would and if I would come in and, basically ask for his attention, not a single time, save for maybe one or two possibly, did he say no. He was always there. When I asked for his attention, he dropped what he was doing and he would participate in his father-son relationship. And when it came to feedback, I will say, is he also simultaneously maintained this, I am your father, I am not your friend. Yeah. And my mother was exactly the opposite of that. Positives and negatives to each, but my mother was very much, I want to be your friend. And it made it very easy for me, especially being, my parents got divorced when I was 12, 13 years old, something like that. So it's kind of really coming into adolescence, and I would exploit the differences, I'll say. So
take me back to, when did you start drinking and when did you start using, and how much were you using at the start, and when was it at its worst?
So I started, so I guess my parents got divorced. I was about 12, 13 years old. I started my interest in alcohol was always there because it wasn't so much like this forbidden substance as it was, I saw the way that it made other people act and feel like they would be a certain way and then they wouldn't be a certain way. And especially, post-divorce. And I'm not laying this at the feet of like, it was the divorce, because by no means it was that. I remember the fascination pre that. But I do remember what is this shift that occurs? What is this that takes place where I see people who could be upset and then all of a sudden they're smiling and laughing and can seemingly talk to anybody and everyone for an extended period of time, and seem also the added benefit of being socially accepted, it seemed like. Now, we could debate the nuance there or not, if that's actually true. But for me, being a 12, 13-year-old kid, I did see that. And through that, I remember having my first couple of drinks, and it didn't do anything for me. I would kind of steal some of the gin that was there that we kept from my grandfather at my parents' house. My brother liked Captain Morgan and other things. And it is funny that I could still remember exactly what it was. And that just goes to show you that my brain holds on to certain details a certain way. But I remember the first time I got sufficiently intoxicated, and it was as if all the things in my life, everything that I was almost like running from and I was scared of, were no longer the boogeyman. Yeah. And I used the phrase, I have arrived. And I was like, this was the missing piece in my life. And I want to feel like this every single day.
Wow. And so that's a big thing to overcome. So rock bottom, I imagine, was not good. Could you let us into that a little bit?
So at my worst, fast forwarding, I mean, I tried to get sober a couple times. Once on my own, that lasted 30 days or 29 days. On the 30th day, I drank. No treatment, no interventions, anything like that. Mm-hmm. I went to a treatment center in Los Angeles, left, we call it AMA, against medical advice, went home, made it a week on my own, relapsed. And that was coming up to the end of 2015. My sober date is June 4th, 2016. And those 6 months between when I'm leaving that treatment center and entering into the final treatment center and beginning my journey in sobriety and ultimately then to recovery, that was the worst period of it all. Not to say before was easy or light, it was very, very dark, but that 6 month period between treatment 2 and treatment 3 was really bad. I was shooting methamphetamines every single day.
Wow.
I was drinking as much as I can get my hands on. I actually have an app now that calculates how much money I've saved since being sober, and it blew me away.
That's so brilliant, because I do think about that, about how expensive even drinking, which is socially acceptable for most of the country, it's expensive hobbies.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, and I always like to tell this story to give people a visual of what this is like, and because, like I said, I grew up in a scenario where I had everything afforded to me. I didn't want for anything other than the things my father said I had to earn, which he was trying to teach me. But all it did was create resentments in my head. But towards the end, I had this little app that was attached to a pocket breathalyzer. And I remember I would use the pocket breathalyzer because if my blood alcohol content went below a certain level, I would risk going into withdrawal and risking seizures and all of those things. And so I would drink. And I would smoke methamphetamines, and I would shoot methamphetamines to keep myself awake so that I can drink more. And God forbid I fall asleep, because if I fall asleep, I wake up in alcohol withdrawal. And I had a time when I could eat, because if I was peaking on as is known on amphetamines, then I wouldn't be able to eat. But if I got too low, then I would fall asleep and wake up in alcohol withdrawal. And it was a full-time job, Alex. It was a full-time job to maintain this balance of alcohol, amphetamines, food. And no wonder, towards the end, I'm weighing under 100 pounds soaking wet. Wow. And so I can't help but think of your dad, who's my friend, and just think about what was your relationship like? I mean, were you talking during this time? Because he never let on that this was going on. I'll tell you, I had one strange interaction with him that now I'm flashing back to. I called in his show as a caller. I'd already been on as a guest before, and I just had my first son. And I called in to talk about how amazing parenting is. And he asked me, and I thought he was playing devil's advocate, but he asked me, what about those families where they have trouble and pain because of their children? And he asked in this way that made me feel like he had some experience that he was going through. And now I feel like I know what it was at the time. I feel like this must have been devastating for the whole family, what you were going through. So could you share a little bit about that with us? I mean, what it's like for families. I mean, I have no doubt that my father, he was going through it. And I mean, now as a new father myself, I have a 10-month-old baby girl, and the most beautiful thing I've ever done with my life. Thank you. And I worry about what she's going to be like. I worry if she has this, some people call it a gene, a predisposition, whatever it is. But I mean, what was it like for him? It was very difficult. I keep putting things back on myself because it's how I can relate to things in the best possible way because when I was going through my program of recovery, I got asked, a simple throwaway question turned into one of the most eye-opening things in my life was, did you steal anything? And I'm like, well, physically, yeah. And they're like, no, deeper than that. And they kept pressing me on it. And I'm like, what do you mean by this? And finally they came out and said, did you steal your parents' peace of mind? And I said, ooh, what do you mean? And they were like, do you think they stayed up at night wondering if they were going to get a call from the hospital? Do you think they were scared every time they didn't hear from you for a week? What did their lives look like? Wow. And it hit me. That is, and then talking with my father, hindsight 2020, and now I have the gift that God has given me, which is a relationship with my father again.
Wow.
And my family that, yeah, I mean, there's of course those times, Alex, there's of course those times where, you know, families don't know if they're going to get the call. They don't know what their loved one is doing. They don't know if their kid's still living at home. And this happens all too frequently, sadly enough, with fentanyl in America, is that, you know, they go up to, you know, get their kid for dinner and the kid's blue. You know, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that because your first guest on the show was talking about a very similar story with fentanyl that I definitely want to come back to that in a second. But I do want to talk a little bit more about you before we get there and get back to the show. But it's interesting how it feels like that there was also an absence of God in your life at the time, and that the drugs had filled a void there. And I find this interesting because I assume your household was filled with a lot of religion, and was that something that was a part of your life at all during your darkest moments, or was that something you had rejected, and have you come back to it since?
I'm smiling right now because it's actually one of my favorite things to talk about now. The simple answer to was I raised in a religious household? Yes. Was religion part of my life in the dark ages, or an active addiction, if you will? Absolutely not. It was the furthest thing from my mind. In fact, I resented it, and I had to work on that and come to a resolution later in life about that. Does religion play a part in my life now? Absolutely. As I said in the Stories of Us, as I talk about as many times as to anybody who will ask me, I say that without God in my life, I would be not only dead. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is what you see in a lot of these cities right now, like in Kensington, Pennsylvania. People who are, I mean, I guess you can call it brain dead. I don't know, but it's like that is a worse existence than actually being dead. Yeah. And people haven't confronted that yet. If I woke up, I would curse God. Why did I wake up?
Wow. I feel like it's important to try to understand what made you decide that you want to share this. You want to share all this with people, because I was unfamiliar with you. I knew that Prager had a son named Aaron. I knew that, but that was all I knew. And then I saw your Stories of Us, which is another PragerU program where you did an interview and you're very open, and, you know, instantly you feel like you get to know someone who shares that much. And then now you're doing this show where you're going to be very vulnerable, very out there. What made you decide that this was the path for you now?
Well, first off, vulnerability is the only way that I know. And there's a phrase in my personal recovery program, I don't mention it due to tradition, is I can only keep what I have by giving it away. That's the only way I can keep it. I have to be of service. I have to bring things to people if I have the ability to. We have another phrase, when anyone anywhere is responsible, I want the hand to be there. Yeah. And I feel like I've been blessed. And one of the things you were talking about with the previous question with religion and God, what role it plays in my life now, is I have a closer relationship to God than I have ever had in my entire life. It is a personal relationship that is anchored by my faith that not only has God brought me from the depths of hell to where I am now, but I have seen in my life where if I put 10% of the effort into a relationship with him that I did into maintaining my addiction, my life doesn't just get exponentially better. It literally becomes something that I didn't know existed. So why would I not, if I have the ability to, try and bring that to somebody? And if I'm able to touch one person, and literally I talked to my wife about this, I'm very different than some people in my family. If I'm able to touch one person only, then I feel like I've been used as a tool of God's will. And for that, I am responsible. It's not a question of if I'm supposed to, it's my obligation.
Remarkable. One thing that was interesting that you brought up is that you had Shabbat in your household. And that was a time where did you honor that? Did you do the traditional steps of having the Shabbat, the Seder meal, and having the not using electronics, things like that? Were you able to connect with your family during that time, even when you were using?
I'd show up to like Thanksgiving, but in terms of, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah's high holy day services, my father would always lead them. It was like it was basically North Korea. I'm like, I'm not going there under any circumstances. Wow. I know what I'm going to be walking into. Like, why would I purposefully put myself into a position where I'm going to get beaten over the head with, listen, man. And especially like I had nothing to offer. I knew that. And talking about inadequacy again, it was like, that was always like the big boogeyman. It was like, what do I have to offer? I'm nothing. I'm so little. And that's the piece I think people miss a lot of the time about this, is that it's just the all the family members will see on the outside of somebody going through this. And like I said, it's not just alcohol and drug addiction. It could be gambling, shopping, debt, porn. Sure. It could be any of these things. And all they see from the outside is what the person's exhibiting, but they don't understand what's going on underneath. And guaranteed they are, where it's like, I'm not going to be around you. I know what's going to happen. I feel like I can't contribute anything. Therefore, I'm worthless. Therefore, I'm living in shame.
So God worked on you, obviously, to get you clean and then to bring you to all these people you're going to be reaching now with your new show. And I think that that's just a really remarkable thing, because it was just a matter of, it's your time now to be out there, I think, and to be connecting with people. And then your father gets injured, and a catastrophic injury almost a year ago. Exactly. It's devastated a lot of us who are fans of his and were accustomed to, listening to his show every day for years. How's he doing, and how has that affected you?
Well, I mean, I will say that my father, where our relationship in the span of, like I said, June 4th, 2016 is my sober date by the grace of God. And, I just passed 9 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I will just take this moment to say I didn't do it. A lot of people don't understand that. I didn't do that. My mode of operation is everything that we're talking about now. Devoid of God, I can't do this. It's just what I believe, and I have to put that out there. But that's also what's anchored me through this, what has happened with my father. We went from talking every single day on the phone to FaceTiming and everything like that. I would bounce ideas off of him. We talk about current politics because, while my show is not political and it shouldn't be political, we're dealing with people's lives. I do have a fascination with politics. I write about it. Anybody who follows me on Twitter can understand that I have some pretty opinionated thoughts. But it was very hard for me, actually, to go from talking to him every day to not talking with him every day. And I've shared this with him. But now that he's able to have his voice, and thank God there was no brain damage, that would have been a totally different story. But the incomplete, C-spine injury, there's definitely hope, and I have to keep living in that as much as possible, just like I know he's living in that right now. And along the way, we get new experiences. Where, I have the phrase that I like to challenge people to, try to think to themselves when things bad are happening to them. They're not happening to you. They're happening around you. And it's about my perception and our perception as to, are we going to let this take us down a dark road? And it's a lot easier for me to say that than for him to say that, obviously, given he's the one who experienced the injury. But I have to put my faith in God that, like, everything that's happening right now it's cliche, but for a reason. But more than a reason, it's for us to be able to understand what's going on with our own lives. To, he talks about clarity all the time, to have a new sense of clarity into what's going on right now, and have the ability to learn what's happening. I don't know why it happened.
If that happened to my father, I feel like it'd be a bigger burden on me than it would be on him. It's probably not. It would probably be worse for him, but I feel like because because I got the same relationship. I need to talk to him all the time, and it just feels like that would be. It's just so hard on everyone. He's been so impressive throughout all this. His interview with Marissa Streit recently. If everyone hasn't listened to that, everyone in my audience should go and find that on Marissa's podcast. Marissa's been on the show before and will be on again. But he's just amazing inspiration because of his love of life. And that's what I wanted to ask you about next is how do you learn to live after recovery? Because it feels like that sounds like a big challenge. It feels like you have to have an epiphany that you got to stop behaving this way, and you do want to live, but then it's such a long road to just how do you do your day to day when your motivation before was using, and then now it's not, and that can never be again as long as you live. I feel like you almost have to reinvent yourself, and could you give us some insight into how you do that?
Well, I mean, to this day, one thing I will say at the top of the order is I don't say, oh, I'm going to be sober the rest of my life. That's a monumental, claim there. That if I walked out here and said that, I go with the 1 day at a time, and early on, 1 hour at a time, and at the very beginning, 1 minute at a time. If I can get through this minute right now, then I'll get to the next minute, and if I can string enough minutes together, maybe I'll not want to jump out of my skin and run out of this treatment center. Then when I'm at the halfway house, oh, this is just a really, bad hour. I want to get through this group. If I can get through this group, then I can go down to the gas station and get some caffeine and a pack of cigarettes back when I smoked, and then that turns into a day. And what I will say though is the misconception is that a lot of people have, I believe, is that just because you have time doesn't mean you have stability. Right. Time doesn't guarantee anything. It's what is your action? what are we doing to ensure? I like to call it recovery insurance, and I like to give the visual of like a steam pipe with gauges on it. You know, I have my do I go to certain meetings gauge? I have my service gauge. I have my spirituality gauge, my prayer gauge. And if I'm starting to feel a little off, or if my spiritual conditioning is feeling a little weird, I got to check to see, are all the pipes, are all the gauges, you know, in the green? And if one's at the red, I got to turn it up a little bit, maybe go to a couple more, you know, support groups, or bring on some more men I get to work with, try to, you know, go take speaking commitments at a hospital or something. And I have to be wary of this. Just like one of the 12-step programs says that there's an order of processes that you have to go through. And one time a mentor of mine hit me with this over the head. They say, Aaron, if you do 10% of the work in sobriety, you're not going to gain 10% of the rewards. You're going to get 0. This is 100 or it's nothing.
Yes,
you might make it for a little bit. You might get down the road a little bit, but I guess to wrap it all together, how did I, you know, get through these like early stages to where I am now? Slowly, painfully. It was not easy. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, everything was great. I'm also going to not sit here and be like, everything was horrible. There's positives and negatives, just like everything in life, and not overcomplicating it was very important. But also, and almost more important than that, was I needed to surround myself with people who had done it before. If I was left to my own devices, screwed. And I have evidence to support that.
There's a phrase that came up in your episode with Zach Livingston. I want to get to that now, but that changing your mind frame from I have to do certain things to I get to do them. And I think that's very powerful, because life changes, and sometimes things that you feel like are maybe felt like work before actually are kind of pleasurable now, and things that felt like a burden before are actually kind of pleasurable now. And I find myself having that internal dialogue with myself a lot, which is some things that seem like a hassle. Actually, those might be the best moments of my day, and I don't want to miss them because I'm grumpy or something about it. But talk to me about this concept.
So it all revolves around gratitude at the end of the day. It all revolves around gratitude, because the opposite of gratitude is ingratitude. And if I'm walking around ungrateful for things, I'm going to gain resentments towards things. And if I start gaining resentments towards things, you know, chances are I'm going to act on that, and I'm going to be a schmuck to a lot of people. And at the end of the day, then I'm going to internalize it and be like, well, you know, then maybe I'm not worthy of God's love, because shame, if I'm living in shame, that means I'm a bad person. And if you're a bad person, why am I worthy of something greater than myself loving me and ultimately a beautiful life? So a lot of this is also to try to prevent against the development of victim mentality. I don't for 1 second claim to be a victim of any circumstance whatsoever. The only thing I can even remotely come close to is that, hey, I was dealt addiction, which is a DSM-5 classified mental illness. Like, I'm not here to debate that, nor do I think it's productive to debate that. I'm more solution oriented now. I want to identify problems and figure out the solutions to them rather than debating the problems about it. And I get to do things, because if you get to do things rather than you have to do them, then you are taking a concrete step every single time you're doing something to realize that these are beautiful things that you're experiencing in your life that a lot of people aren't able to do. A lot of people walk around like, oh my God, I got to go to the grocery store. I got to go to a job. I got to work overtime. It's like, well, you're working overtime to support your family if you have one, and your kids, and put them through school. Like, that's a beautiful thing.
No, it's funny. I was in the grocery store last night, and I was having this exact conversation. I was like, I can't believe Sunday night I should be watching a show or getting ready for work tomorrow, or doing something nice. And I would find myself wandering around the grocery store, and I was thinking, no, actually, I'm listening to music. The store's empty. I'm getting all this great stuff because I'm not broke. Like this is good. Like this is to have a little fun, and everything will be okay. And it's just it's a change of your perception of the same exact activity, and it's just very healthy and helpful. But I want to talk about the show itself. So your first guest is a guy named Zach Livingston. I want you to tell me about him. But more interesting is, how do you select your guests? Because I don't know Zach. He's not someone who's familiar to me. And it's one of these things where in my world, everyone just tries to get politicians for their debut show. And I just think, I want to know how you're planning on selecting guests.
Well, there's not going to be any politicians on American Recovery, as far as I know, as of now. So Zach and I, I'll answer your question, then I'll tell you more about Zach. So we select guests based on, first and foremost, are you going to be able to deliver a positive message? Are you going to deliver a message that people need to hear? And I don't care if you have no social media presence or you have 1 million followers. In fact, if you don't have any social media presence, I'd prefer to have you, because you have less ego involved in this right now. And I think that's important too, is people who have, at least in my experience, I've seen who have more ego tend to come across a lot more fake. And if you're dealing with people's lives, which is what recovery is, and I'm not just once again, I'm not just talking about people who are dealing with drug addiction or alcoholism, because codependency can be just as deadly as a needle can. Given enough time, it really can. Toxic relationships can get just as bad, I want people to be on the show who are able, first off, and you don't even have to have been through it yourself, but just to have an understanding that you're able to convey a message that we know is good, that people have been not able to hear for a very long time. And finally, we have a platform with, and I'm just very grateful that I've been given the opportunity to have this platform to try to reach people. Now, Zach, on the other hand, him and I actually have a personal relationship. Him and I were in rehab together back in 2016. And then we went to Halfway House together in 2016. And then I left that halfway house. He got kicked out of that halfway house and went down to Tennessee. But we stayed in contact off and on and whatnot. And he is now a interventionist for a group called the Firm of Nashville. And he's done a couple guest spots as an interventionist actually on the show Intervention. So he does have some on-camera, history at least. But not all the guests have on-camera history. We first and foremost want to have people that are on that can convey a message of hope, first and foremost, and to be able to discuss some of the things that otherwise, because the YouTube algorithm, the Rumble algorithm, whatever it is, it's just it's not being pushed enough given the societal landscape right now.
So what I want to understand is that it feels like you've got this big opportunity to grow a big share of the pie. And I feel like PragerU is a conservative brand, and this is completely apolitical show. And I like the idea of conservative people creating content that is about life also. And I feel like this is something that at Breitbart, we've been talking about this for a long time, but most of our stuff, our bread and butter is political, or if it's not political, it's culture wars. And so this was noticeably completely devoid of politics, first episode, hour long. And I think this is a great strategy, because I feel like the left has beat us a lot in this regard, is that they create content that there is not really political, but is just for normal people. And I feel like that's a real opportunity here, is that this is not just for a right of center audience, arming right of center audience with arguments. This is just life content. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm the American recovery isn't political in and of itself, but I do have my own political opinions about things. And when it comes to dealing with people's lives, I'll keep it light. I think there's a clear partisan divide over which side tends to hold life as a priority versus the one who doesn't. So yeah. I feel like, to your point, it is a very natural fit at PragerU, even though to the normal PragerU audience, or people who discovered on YouTube, it might seem different. It's not, Xavier DeRousseau talking about pop culture. It's not Shabbos Kestenbaum, with his brand new show, The Brief, talking to, border agents and people about Israel. But it's a fundamental conservative principle, actually, that, we prioritize life. And myself, I am a conservative. I don't shy away from talking about that either. Yeah. So like I said, to your point, I think it's a natural fit.
Yeah, I think it's a natural fit too. I really like this idea. Yeah, and you guys are launching some new stuff. I'm going to talk to Shabbos again, who's been on the show a couple times. I'll talk to him soon. He's got a new show. So I will mention that. Everything PragerU does is great. You guys know what a big believer I am in everything you guys are doing at PragerU. And so here's an important question. How long do you think a podcast should be?
How long should a podcast be?
Yeah, this is the big debate. We all have it, all as podcasters.
Okay, so let's go the shortest acceptable half hour, longest acceptable, without a panel. I mean, Rogan's the standard, 2.5. So yeah, sweet spot, hour and a half.
So this is where I find it to be so I find the cadence of Rogan's show, like I don't understand it, but obviously it's the biggest show. So clearly it works. I just haven't quite figured it out. I just feel like I just get bored of myself after about 45 minutes. And I feel like, so how could anyone else still be interested? And I feel like what's the longest we've pushed it, Misty? An hour? I'm talking to producer. An hour 15? That's about it. That's about as long as I can go before I start boring myself. But somehow Rogan does it. But how many of the Rogan shows you listen to, you go through the whole thing? Do you ever listen to the whole thing?
No, I'll listen to Tim Pool's show though, which is about 2 hours. I'll listen to that. And a lot of that though comes when I'm, in the car, in the gym, something like that. He's got the panel going. He's got the panel going. Yeah. I think with Rogan, the reason why people I have an answer to this. I think the reason why most people have no problem with such a long format is there is an aspect that I'm going to be talking about on American Recovery at some point, which is the lack of connection that people have. And if you feel like you've all heard of what's called parasocial relationships, where, you feel like the streamer or the podcaster is actually a friend of yours. It's like, that's not a healthy thing. And with how much social media we have, this is something we'll be talking about as well, social media addiction and the prevalence of, all these different applications, you're gonna zone into this. And it could be 5 hours. It could be 10 hours. There are people who will sit there and watch it. And do I think that's necessarily healthy? Maybe not, but
Yeah. And it's sort of, you could break it up also, but I think Rogan, when I heard him say, you don't have to listen to it all at once. You could listen to it over a few days, but Rogan, I think he said something that I thought was pretty interesting, that he feels like sometimes it takes 2 hours to get people off their talking points. And I think that might be true. I feel like if I did a show like that, I could probably do at least the first couple hours, just all bread and butter stuff I've talked about before. But I don't know hour 3, hour 4, if it would all be stuff that wouldn't be totally fresh. So I think that's part of what he's going after. But sometimes I find when I listen to his show, the way he gets there is he'll have two super interesting people, and then he'll just be going through boxing history. And I have no interest in boxing history. And then I feel like, well, where are we going with this thing? Can you guys talk about something that I care about? And then I move on. I listen to one of a million other shows. But I think that this is a great concept for a show. I'm happy you guys are doing it. American Recovery, how often is it going to come out?
I think we're still kind of working this out right now. I believe we're going to be airing the long form, which we just aired episode 1. I think that's going to be at once a month. But we're probably going to be ramping that at some point. I'm not exactly sure. My producer is going to have to correct me on this.
So who is the exact target audience? Who are the people that you feel like really are just, you want to get these people in the bus right away?
Well, the people I think who feel like they have been trying to talk to people about what's going on, but they're just speaking different languages. I mean, this is what I always say, like with my father, all I really wanted was somebody to ask me how my day was a lot of the time. But what he's saying is, oh, why doesn't Aaron have a job at 20 years old? Why, what's going on there? And when I tried to talk to people about what I was actually feeling with my addiction and what I was processing inside my emotions, my mentality, trying to describe my spiritual bankruptcy, when I was trying to describe that to people, it was like I was speaking English and they were speaking Swahili. You know what I mean? Even with therapists to some regard, not knocking all therapists and psychotherapy, but even with some therapists, I'm speaking German, they're speaking Polish, and then I, for some reason, walk into a certain recovery program and people who are plumbers and electricians and people with no degrees, we're both speaking English now. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people, and I've even seen in the comments so far, some people are just like, they're so like not able to process what's going on. And I'm like, well, then I think we're doing a good job right now. And might be counterintuitive to analytics and everything like that. But the people it needs to reach, it's going to reach, given the platform that we're on. And once again, cannot be more grateful for that. The people who haven't had a voice.
And I'll just tell you, even if you're not someone who's recovering or thinking about recovery, it just, as someone in my life who, so many of us, I feel like most of us have been affected by addiction to some degree and would like to understand it better because it's such a powerful thing in this moment in particular where we've solved some of society's biggest problems. We don't have food scarcity. It doesn't seem like we're gonna the human race is gonna die off anytime soon unless we start bombing each other, which it doesn't feel like we're doing right now, especially with the peace president in there. So this really is a time to start thinking about this stuff because we got to deal with it, and we're in a brave new world. But there are tools that are out there, and part of the tools is some of that sort of online relationship, friendship building that you can have with your favorite hosts. So as I did with your dad so many decades ago, Aaron. So, all right, well, keep up the great work. Aaron Prager, American Recovery, and we don't have an exact cadence, but you go to prageru.com, and all the content Aaron's doing is terrific. And I'm really glad you're out there. It's really nice to meet you, and it's a huge supporter.
You as well, Alex. Thank you so much.